Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Matthias Laug. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Tier Mobility. And I'm happy to talk to you today about combining culture and tech or creating high-performance teams and the frameworks that I personally use together with my management team at Tier Mobility in the product and tech department. Culture and high performance is something that is quite important to me, as it is sometimes separated that high performance environment are not necessarily meant for a good culture. We sadly have too many examples of where this is true, but I believe they can also be quite complementary. And I would like to present the frameworks that we're using here. I assume you're all safe and sound at home and all being healthy. This is the typical work from home situation right now. So I'm sitting here in my bedroom. So if you hear a kid crying, this is my daughter, don't worry. If you hear scratches, this is my dog trying to get in. And if anyone accidentally tries to get in because they forgot that I'm in this call, this is then probably my wife. So let's do a quick introduction of what Tier and the product team specific is around, so that you get a couple of key facts on how the entire team is compositioned to get you more context on the frameworks and ultimately. So we're around about 100 people. This involves everyone: tech, product managers, product designers, researchers, data analysts, data engineers, etc. Everything that we need to keep our tech running. We've had quite a successful time in which we hired lots of people, where only 3 of them actively quit. And I think that also gives you an impression on, while we're keeping up on our performance, it is not dragging out people. And it's not that people are giving up, but they actually grow within our culture. At this point, we're running around 16 teams, of which a couple of them are product teams, a couple of them are research teams, platform teams, supporting teams, etc. And all of them are being managed currently by me and my 4 directors, and recently joined a CPO, Georgie, which I'm very happy to have on board. It's about, for us, building the safe environment where it is good and okay to fail, where you learn from it. But building this is really hard, and specifically to maintain it is really, really hard. Such an environment is really quite fragile. And one of the most important things, I believe, that contributes towards this is diversity inside of the team. I've looked onto this topic from the beginning of Tier, and we achieved quite a high diversity on ethnicities, sexuality, genders, backgrounds, etc. And the more people are there, the more people are also willing to speak up, and this is paramount for the entire setup. Now, talking a little bit about the frameworks that I like to present to you. The first one is the 4 key metrics. The second one is our interpretation of the value stream, or rather the idea of making the value stream implicit. It's privileged autonomy and the 4 disciplines of execution. All of those frameworks we're using specifically in the product department to keep running. Why do we use those? So the 4 key metrics we're using to measure output, quality, and agility, and that's going to be the first framework that I'm also going to present. The value stream is to understand the impact, because it's not only about something nice and good at a high velocity. It needs to have meaning, and it needs to have an impact on either our revenues, user behavior, etc. And it's about privileged autonomy, a subject that I'm only briefly touching because it can be quickly explained, but I believe it is something so simple yet powerful. And it allows us to scale with our company while keeping the management lean. Reminder again, there's 4 directors while there's 100 people, and it is quite self-organized, but it's not chaos and anarchy and base democracy, quite the opposite to a certain extent. But we are able to run with this with a very lean management. And then ultimately the 4 disciplines of execution that we're using to create a weekly focus, because there's a couple of activities that run over a certain period of time, sometimes even month. And how do you know that you're progressing towards your topic? And how do you know that you're going to have impact eventually? And the 4 disciplines of execution created this certainty for us that allowed teams to understand what are they driving this week that might eventually have an impact in 2-3 months. So how do we measure our delivery performance? It is with the 4 key metrics. Those are lead time, mean time to recovery, deployment frequency, and change fail percentage. And if you want to know a lot more about this, they are taken from the book Accelerate. Highly recommended read. What do I love about those key metrics? It's you do not see an individual metric there that is coined towards one single contributor. It's a team metric. People have good days, people have bad days. People feel sad, people feel happy, people feel productive, focused, distracted. But at best, you have a team that is filling up for each other's gaps. And therefore, it is important for me to measure the team performance, not so much the individual performance. So what are we measuring here? The lead time is the time to create value. How long does it take for a story from it's ready to develop to it is in production? What is the mean time to recovery? So our ability to fail fast. And I'd like to highlight that here that we're explicitly not measuring the mean time to failure. Because it doesn't matter how many failures we make if we are able to recover in milliseconds, and that we optimize towards recovery instead of preventing failure, because that usually makes you slow, while recovery makes you bold and confident. And you could ask yourself the question, how junior can a person be that you allow that person to deploy the production? If you have a low mean time to recovery, you're going to be very confident because it doesn't matter how many mistakes that person does. Then it's about deployment frequency to assess the agility of the tech stack to react to change. And ultimately the change fail percentage on the deployment pipeline so that we can assess the ability to see how quickly do we see the quality of what we're going to release, and how quickly do we also assess the ability to test something locally before it hits the deployment pipeline. And we go a little bit more into detail on why I specifically also love those metrics, because they have a causal correlation. Try to cheat them. Many people try it, and I had many conversations every time in an onboarding. People are not able to do this, and they haven't come up with a single way to cheat them all. You can cheat a single one, but another one deteriorates. Let me give you an example. The first thing that people are going to tell me if I'm telling them, hey, look at the deployment frequency, and I want to make sure that you do at least 50 deployments per team across your tech stack. And say like, wait, that doesn't make sense. I can forge this this metric by just adding comments to my code. But then the lead time is going to deteriorate because you're not creating value. Your story won't move. You could also say, great, my change fail percentage, I'm just going to stop deploying things. And I'm not introducing any errors anymore. Hence, my mean time to recovery over time is going to be super. Again, lead time and deployment frequency are going to deteriorate. So you can only optimize all of them, or one of them is going to go down. And there's usually then a token of conversation in which you can go to the team and ask them what is happening here. And then you go to the bottom of it. And there's always a different reason most of the times behind it. And sometimes it's completely okay that the deployment frequency is going down because the team is doing investigative things. And then, yes, you're going to have a talk over that, but they're going to give you a valid reason, and then you retract and you go back. So it's important to see them as a token of conversation. Act on them if you're below performance. Ask the team what is up, and then figure out and see whether the answer is acceptable or not. So we're measuring all this based on data that we're gathering from GitHub, Sentry, Circle CI, our choices for version control, exception handling, and deployment tooling. So we looked at various numbers there at which we can see them, how quickly we can actually recover. Here we look at the data that we have from Sentry, in which we see how quickly can we go back from an issue has been registered in Sentry to the point that it has been addressed. This helped, once we introduced this, to constantly fix and address our issues. And it's then again totally fine that a team realizes, hey, this just doesn't make sense to make anything with this exception. We just log it away. And that is totally fine. You still keep your code clean, and new exceptions that are being registered are actually valid and valuable for you to see. So once we had the spike there, we made this agreement, said like, sure, look into whether this exception is anyhow of concern for you. If not, if it's just an FYI for you, and it's actually an exception that you just need to know about, then just log it away. The deployment frequency measured through Circle CI is also one of the ones that we constantly look at. We set the team goal to 50 releases by week. This is rather arbitrary, and you can choose actually a number that feels representative for you. How do you feel comfortable if you're able to do this many releases a week per team? Does it give you confidence in the field that you're in, that your stack is agile enough at the right parts that you can act on any change of requirements or a bug has been discovered? How quickly can the team change? How comfortable do they feel on releasing? And we set 50 as a number based on the amount of services that we have, that we feel good that the teams are moving on with that. And you see, once we introduce the metric at the beginning of the year as an actual team metric to look into, and before we're just measuring it, you see the constant increase. And you see also when a big event is happening. So when in September, we did lots of changes, there were regulatories are coming in, and we adapted a lot of things. And the team was able to pull this off, and it resulted in a magnificent spike in deployments because they are able to do this, because they kept themselves fluent and comfortable in constantly deploying. We look at the failure rate. And since we're measuring this, we also see on a steady curve on the failure rate, and we're not happy with that. And what we did is we looked into what the reason for this is. And the result was that people have a hard time testing certain aspects of the application, specifically integrated in the pipeline, outside of the pipeline on their local machine. So this is something where we are actively investing in now to provide people with the tooling they need. Again, the result can be something completely different for any other company, yet in our case, this was the main reason. People had a hard time to work on their local machine to test the application. Hence, this is an investment we're going to do, and we expect this one to go down over time. Then measuring the lead time. This I briefly explained in the beginning. Again, here explanatory already the distinctions as well, that we only measure this from the moment we're going into delivery. Discovery is such a fuzzy topic. You discard a lot of things. So you work a lot for the bin. You look at designs, possible solutions, etc. And you say, that's not good, that's not good. You throw it away. Measuring this, we're not feeling really comfortable or representative for what it is. Once we determine this is something that brings value to us, then we want to measure how quickly can we bring this value to production. Our target is 3 days, while we're currently at 6 to 7 days. So right now, on average, a story takes 6 to 7 days to go through. Why the 3 days? I believe any unit of work that can be done at a high likelihood within the same week has the best efficiency without actually talking about efficiency. Because if you don't have the weekend in between, you don't need to on and offboard yourself on this very story from Friday to Monday. You also don't take this baggage home when you're not finishing on your story. by the end of the week. So we're looking into possibilities how to improve this. And the simplest one again is, and this is what I meant with you can't cheat the metric, is when people suggested, yeah, we just make our stories half as big then. I said, please, you're a guest, be welcome. It's exactly what I'm asking you for to do. If that is your reaction and you think you're cheating and you're sneaking your way around the system, then have this feeling. I'm happy to give it to you, but ultimately you're doing exactly what everyone is preaching the entire time. Make your iterations in small shippable artifacts. So to come to the conclusion here, this is the 4 metrics that we're using to measure our delivery performance. But this is only output and quality assessment. And we want to understand how much impact do we have. So we wanted to make our value stream implicit. This is now a snapshot from a huge mirror board in constant work, constantly commented, constantly adjusted. And I would like to first show you a little more simplified version of it. And that is, when we're talking about the value stream, it is a connection of actions and outcomes. The actions can either be company actions. So those are rather deterministic. So you put money on something, and as a result, you get an outcome. The more money you put on it, the higher your outcome is. The more scooters you buy, the more scooters you get. And then there are customer actions, which are more behavioral. So we can only measure them in the form of a conversion rate. They're non-deterministic. But both of them drive outcomes. While the one is, okay, how many start rides do we have? Is the other one, how many active scooters do we have by how many scooters did we purchase? So this connection we've driven through the entire company and tried to make a clear understanding of how value has been from the very finest KPI that is relevant to our North Star KPI, weekly active riders. So based on this, looking back at the snapshot that we have here. So once we understand the value stream, so in this case, for example, it is a user swap. So the action where a customer is taking the scooter, the battery out of the scooter themselves, is going to the store, putting this into our cabinets with batteries, taking a fresh battery out, puts it in, gets a confirmation, gets 10 minutes. We're going to roll this out across Europe next year. Right now, it's a pilot in Tampere with 50 units. So once we understood how the entire system flows, we have the ability to make people understand where they are contributing towards. Instead of then reporting just a list of activities, I actually know how to report to outcomes, and I, as another team, am even having an understanding on how I'm being influenced by that. So let's take the team on the right that is owning the customer action users battery swap. So within the app, there's a feature that allows the customer to do a swap. And the outcome of this team is how many successful swap rates do we have? What is the time that is required on average to do a swap? How many of the percentages of the swaps have been done at this specific host? How many batteries have we lost through the process? And how many of those people are coming back, as an example. But all of those metrics are just outcomes of this action, while they're heavily dependent on other things, such as how many of those spots where you can swap are actually available. So our successful swap rate could actually significantly drop, as well as our understanding of how many swaps have been done during the day by users. Yeah, but it's not because the app is dysfunctional or is not driving and incentivizing the right behavior. It's all about we don't have enough swap spots. So our expansion team needs to look into, okay, we need to acquire more shops where we are able to look into this. Once the team has fully understand this, they can also state reverse requirements and goals towards each other. Because usually what happens is the product team is being faced with, hey, you need to achieve this conversion rate. And then they are struggling and fighting. And when it goes up, they're like happy. But as soon as it goes down, they don't know what to do. And this is because they don't know the influential factors that they cannot drive. So they need to go towards this team and saying, hey, I calculated this. If I want to achieve this, you need to give me at least this many swap stops. It's, by the way, an awful name. I think we need to rename it. It's always a tongue twister. So this, giving as an example, allows us then to understand, all right, given the dependency of outcomes of certain actions, how do we cut the teams? Do we have, like in the example before, have the expansion team taking care of the acquisition of the spots, while there's a product team building the app functionalities to do a swap? Or are they so heavily interlinked that it actually rather makes sense to move them all together? And this is where we drive all our organizational change in the form of cross-functional setup. We're making sure that those teams, while understanding their inputs and dependencies, that they're making also good decisions on with whom do they need to work in a team constantly on a daily basis, and with whom do they just interact in the stakeholder relation. Last but not least, the 4 disciplines of execution. So before I jump into that, the quick statement on, I go back to the last slide there, on privileged autonomy. Given that every team understands the impact that they're having, and everything is linked towards our North Star KPI, weekly active riders, any activity that we run inside of the company to an extent should be arguable towards weekly active riders. Therefore, comparable, meaning the marketing team is able to compare their activity and the impact it's going to have through this value stream towards something on the complete other side, such as the hardware team building a blinker on the scooter. Once this becomes comparable, teams can do bets on what we do want to drive, because usually there's certain supporting and centralized teams that form dependencies to all of them. Once things become comparable, we can decide of what bet we're going to take. And the privileged autonomy is that we're setting up the teams in the way that we don't even need to decide this on the C level, but this can be decided on the team level. And based on how good people are doing their bets, the less we need to go in from management and give them an idea of what they need to do next as an initiative. Because if they're able to do good bets and validate this, why should we interfere with them? Now, last but not least, the 4 disciplines of execution. So the 4 disciplines of execution is our approach to enable the teams to understand how on a weekly basis they can drive value, while things might only have an impact after 2 to 3 months. A new feature has been introduced. The previously described feature of the user swap is a product that we've built for 5 months. How does the team know that they're going to have an impact? The 4 disciplines define, therefore, 4 disciplines. What a surprise. Focus on the widely important goal, or as I call it, just do less. Act on the lead measures, keep a score, and hold a weekly cadence. So what did we do with the team in the process of our fully understanding using this value stream? Once they understood the business metric that they're going to drive, how can they make sure that they're gonna influence it with the activities that they're doing right now? So the teams try to figure out what their lead measures are. Once they figured this, they created a scoreboard and checked on those on a weekly basis. Based on this, the team came up with quite nice lead indicators, which we currently trying to evaluate and trying to prove that correlation equals causation, which is the difficult part now. So the lagging indicator at the top represents, again, one of the KPIs you've seen previously on the value stream. And now the team on a weekly basis looks at how many hours do we spend on the activity that we put as priority. Another measurement that they introduced is, how many ad hoc meetings do we require for alignment? And the other one is, how much confidence do we have on our next initiative, coming to their understanding how important autonomy is for them. And since it's a privilege, it needs to be earned. And since it needs to be earned, they need to measure how good they are at it. So whenever they are driving a research and discovery on an initiative, they are measuring and assessing how confident they are that this initiative is going to drive the lagging indicator. They're going to use the ad hoc meetings to understand how good are we at aligning in our kickoff meeting. Or do we just like to all jump out of the meeting and then jump back because somebody misunderstood or somebody is missing, right? There can be various factors while an ad hoc meeting needs to be called in. And the hour spent in focus. And the hour spent in focus is maybe a good example for causation. It doesn't equal correlation, because if you do not spend time in focus, I guarantee you're not going to hit your target. If you do spend time in focus, I'm more confident, but I'm not sure. And it's not a guarantee. Yet those are the leading indicators that the teams use to predict that on a weekly basis, they have a good feeling of they're moving something. And it increased confidence and it increased happiness of impact for the teams, because they could not they did not just wait for after 4 or 5 months a big initiative has been released. No, they got confident that, hey, this week we moved something and we are confident that we're going to win. We're going to win this week, therefore we're going to win the month, therefore we're going to win the year. This is ultimately the essence in which I believe drives the happiness. People are feeling safe to raise their voice in a diverse culture. They are safe to fail, but they also know they're winning. And all this put together using those frameworks creates the culture that I personally love at TIER, and that I'll continue to foster. This is about it. And I'm happy to take any questions through the chat if there are any. Thank you for listening. Very well. Then thank you very much for listening. And I hope you enjoy the evening, and I hope you all stay healthy. Thank you very much. Bye.